Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Grace Holland. WRAL's documentary team took a comprehensive look at a growing epidemic among teens, vaping. Gen V, Teen Vaping in North Carolina airs tonight, and in it you'll hear from teens who vape, a mother who lost her son to vaping, and the doctors and lawmakers trying to combat it. WRAL investigative documentary reporter Cristin Severance joins me in the studio to talk about how this project came together. Cristin, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, watching the documentary, you interviewed so many teens about the role that vaping plays in their lives.
I think vaping is one of the biggest issues our generation needs to address.
It's been noticeable since I was in 6th grade.
And kids even before the age of 13 are trying vapes.
Friends, family, everyone. You see it everywhere.
How hard is it for young people to get vapes?
I don't think it's difficult at all.
And kids also get them from their friends. And where their friends get it is vape stores.
I always paid like an upperclassman to go get them for me.
Because many shops don't ask kids for their ID.
How did you meet those kids?
So this is always the toughest part when you work on a story or a documentary about an issue that impacts young people. You know, your very first hurdle is, well, how are we going to find young people to talk to about this? You know, you can go to a school, but many districts are leery about letting TV crews or a documentary crew, interview kids, even if they agree with the project. And there are just a lot of hoops to jump through. And we did a lot of the production over summer, so really schools were out. So we reached out to places like the Poe Center for Health Education, got connected with teen advocates. So these are young adults and teenagers who are really passionate about studying vaping, researching it, and then trying to prevent young people from doing it. We interviewed them. They were super impressive. One of the young people, they did a project where they mapped out all of the vaping stores around his high school, Enloe High School in Raleigh. 86 stores within a 2-mile radius of that high school. Yes, so the density was really, really surprising. We also went out to places like skate parks. We went to downtown Apex, Target parking lots, and met young people, and we asked them about vaping. We just learned so much about how often this is happening and where it's happening.
One of the most moving parts of the documentary is the conversation that you have with a son who lost her son to health complications that were caused by vaping. What stood out to you most about her story?
I think the thing that sticks in my mind when I think of her story, that her stepson was not vaping that long. She said at best they can tell he'd been vaping for a year. And, she said, and his doctors confirmed, that vaping destroyed his body, destroyed his lungs. This was a healthy, football-playing 15-year-old. And when he got sick, she said he could barely walk to the bus stop. So I think just that was such a short amount of time. This wasn't someone who vaped for 20 years.
Right.
So sad. And now she really is on this mission to talk to young people, tell his story, and just raise awareness that this can happen.
Right. And of course, you found her through the course of doing this story, but what made you want to look into this in the first place?
So I remember doing some investigative stories when vaping was huge in 2019. And there was this.
I did too. In Greenville, we talked a lot about it. Yeah.
And if you'll remember, there was this really serious lung disease being caused by vaping. People were really sick. They were in the hospital or dying. And then the pandemic happened. So all of the focus when it came to health stories, of course, switched, right? It's COVID, vaccine, all of that. But it was always on my radar because it's so popular. There's such little regulation. And then our 6 p.m. producer at WRAL, Noah Klein, who is in his 20s, he pitched it. He said, you really should do a documentary on vaping. He said, his generation has been vaping for 10 years now, since middle school. Then you have this current generation, there's this upcoming generation vaping. Plus North Carolina, there's so much there. First state in the U.S. to go after the vaping company Juul for targeting young people. They settled before trial. So much to get into, really good subject material, and it was really good for a documentary, and that's why we decided to do it.
All right, let's take a quick break right there. When we come back, we're going to talk about how we got here and what Cristin learned about curbing this addiction. I think most people have heard of Juuls or vaping in the last 10 years. We talked about how big of a deal it was in 2019. It felt like there was a lot of coverage just nationwide about it. Cristin, was there anything that surprised you about why these products are so addictive for teens in particular?
Right. Well, nicotine is addictive. It's just really bad for kids because obviously they're still growing, they're still developing. So it's bad for brain development, bad for kids' lungs because, you're heating this liquid up, you're inhaling it. CDC says that aerosol in e-cigarettes can contain cancer-causing chemicals, heavy metals, tiny particles that can be inhaled deep into the lungs. The flavors themselves can be really harmful. We know 90% of kids who vape in North Carolina, they vape with flavors. And again, this documentary is not about adults choosing to vape. It's about kids and what vaping can do to kids.
Right. And I think about when I was a teen, it was still all about cigarettes. I think vaping kind of came out when I was in about college.
Okay.
It's just interesting to see that dynamic shift, right? Now, you put this to the test of whether these vape shops are IDing customers. This was really interesting to watch how this worked. Were you surprised by the results of that test?
No, I have to say I was not, just because truly, I'm not exaggerating when I say every young person I interviewed told me it is so easy to get vapes. It does not matter how old you are. And we sent a 21-year-old production assistant at WRAL into more than a dozen vape shops around Raleigh to see who would card. This is important. Federal law is 21. You have to be 21 to buy tobacco products. North Carolina, one of the last states to still be 18. And so stores are supposed to card young people no matter how old they are. And, we'll show you what happens in the doc. But to answer your question, no, I was not surprised by the results.
Okay. And so you also explained there's a new law in North Carolina that creates a registry for vape products. That was actually proposed by a Wake County legislator. It's not perfect, though. There's a loophole. And I wonder, do you get the sense that vaping is an issue that state legislators are willing to continue to keep chipping away at, I guess?
It's such a good question. Yes and no. This was passed and touted as a way to protect people from harmful products. But during our research and investigating, tobacco prevention advocates from the state, from the Lung Association, pointed out several loopholes with this law. The law is supposed to only allow products with FDA authorization on store shelves. But, we found out companies who've applied and they're waiting, or companies who applied and denied can still sell. But I think the biggest thing, to answer your question, they did not raise that age. Federal law is 21, state law is 18. And when I asked them, Democrat, Republican, they did not give me straight answers on that.
Yeah, I found that really insightful.
And so they are willing to, both of them said, sure, we'll talk. We need to talk about it. But I didn't get this sense that this is going to be something that, either the lawmakers in the documentary are really going to spearhead. Now, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And, we'll see when session, resumes in January. But I did get some wishy-washy answers on that.
Right. And just in doing the documentary, do you have any sense of why that is? There was an expert, I think, who kind of talked about the history with tobacco that North Carolina has. Right. That seemed to be part of it.
Right. I just think, again, I was very, upfront with the lawmakers I interviewed. I said, well, I'm surprised you aren't giving me an answer either way. Why are you not taking a stand and saying, yes, I think we should raise it, or no, I don't think we should raise it, and here's why. And, they said it's a gray area, and there's many gray areas in North Carolina. So I think, people like advocates from the Lung Association say, look, the tobacco lobby is really powerful in North Carolina. When this vaping registry bill was passed, a tobacco lobbyist testified in front of lawmakers on why they should pass it. And so I do think, many say that has something to do with why they aren't, taking a stand one way or the other.
Right. And then, of course, another way of addressing this issue is prevention and treatment. And you look at that at the end of the documentary, the different options that we have in the state and the funding. What do the resources look like on that front?
Well, because North Carolina sued Joel, there's so much money coming into the state, $48 million. So that is going to go to things like quit lines, research, prevention. One thing we didn't get into the documentary because, we do have to leave things out for time. As part of that settlement, there was this huge repository of documents and patents and all of this information on really how Joel was created and marketed, and that's housed in North Carolina. So there are some really interesting things happening. UNC also has a very unique program for kids, for teens, to help them quit and help them with nicotine addiction. So there are some really interesting things happening in this state.
Yeah, and I know that moving forward, a lot of people are going to watch this when it airs tonight. What do you hope people get out of it? And I know that you watched it with your own son. So what did you kind of get out of it watching it with them?
I can't always, so they're 8. They're about to turn 8. They're twins, twin boys. And I can't always show these documentaries to them because sometimes the subject matter is just too serious. They just aren't old enough. But with this, I watch it a lot because that's just part of the editing process. And they would hear it and they'd come over and they would watch it with me. And I did end up letting them watch it. And we had a really good conversation about what is vaping, what it can do to young people, and what it can do to their brains and their bodies. And they got it. They understood it. And they do not seem interested in ever vaping. And so I hope parents can use this as a way to talk to their kids, watch it with their kids, because, all of these teenagers, you'll hear it in the doc. It is happening. I mean, 1 in 8. 1 in 8. I know nationally some of the levels have gone down, which advocates say it's a great sign. But 1 in 8, that's still a lot of high school students doing this.
Right. All right. Well, thank you so much, Cristin. We appreciate you investigating this. Gen V, Teen Vaping in North Carolina airs tonight at 7:30. You can watch that on WRAL News or on WRALdoc.com. Thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download. Another great way to get WRAL News is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email that's waiting in your inbox every morning with local news, events, and headlines to get you ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.